Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share with us how dealing with the loss of her mother and 2 miscarriages led her to re-examine her childhood and really define grief and start healing. Please help me in welcoming Katie Russler. Katie, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. I know we are on opposite sides of the world, so how are you doing for you this afternoon?
I am good, Claudia. Thank you. Yeah, we have a big ocean between us and a 6-hour difference. So yeah, you're starting your day and I am halfway through, more than halfway through.
Well, congratulations on being halfway through with kids and still having a big smile on your face.
As I shared with you before we started recording, this is my first child-free moment of the day. So I will probably smile, even though we're going to talk about difficult things the whole time.
Love it. Well, I love the positivity because we're definitely going to need it, as you said, through this episode. Before we really jump into it, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I am an expat living in Munich, Germany. That is why there's a 6-hour difference. I am married to a German man who he and I have these wonderful 3 girls, 7, 4.5, and 7 months old. She just turned 7 months old. So, and I'm also a couples therapist here in the area, and opened a private practice shortly after we moved here in order to help the English-speaking couples who were struggling with adjustment and transition. And in living here in the time I've been here, I've lost my mom and I've had 2 miscarriages. And so I started working more in grief after that. And it just so happened that 2020 happened at that time frame as well, a couple of years later. And so grief was very present in my life and basically in the world. And therefore, I started to talk more about transformative grief and how it is actually a tool for growth. And it's not always linked to death, because often we don't realize what we're going through. We're being really reactive to people. We're escaping on our phones. We can't connect anymore. And a lot of it is grief. And once we finally start to really face that, we're able to heal it and transform it into something that empowers us to create a podcast or, YouTube channel, and it allows us to really speak to people and help people, or write a book like I have, or start to do stuff in our community, help the next generation. It transforms into this powerful tool, but we have to get there first, and we have to grieve first. So, that's a little bit about myself. A little bit, it's pretty heavy stuff. So.
For sure. Yes, you just jumped right in there. I do want to obviously talk about a few of the things that you mentioned, but I want to go even further back a little bit, because I know that at a young age, you experienced, whether we call it grief, trauma, or just difficulty, because you moved around quite a bit as a child. And I know, even when young kids move once, it can be very traumatic because suddenly all their friends are gone and they have to make new friends and go to a new school. So will you talk a little bit about how that was as a child and how that affected you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a military family. My dad was Air Force, and we moved every 2 to 3 years. And in fact, the 4 years of college was the first time I stayed in one place that long. Oh. So, which was, and I still moved dorms. So I felt like I'm still moving. Everything's good. You get a little antsy when you move that much, but there's a grief process in regularly pulling up those roots, and then transitioning to a new place. The last place we moved to was right after my parents divorced, and it wasn't I don't want to say military friendly area, but if you're military, you understand there are areas that know military families come and go, and they're very welcoming. And then there's areas that are not used to it. And so they're not always like, oh, they're new, we should really bring them in, even though we were in the South and in Alabama. So it was a transition of having to go to a high school where it'd be the new kid in 10th grade and, middle of your high school time. But I think the biggest thing it taught me, one, is adaptability. and a big reason why it worked for me to move back to Europe, because we lived here when I was younger, was that I knew how to be flexible and adaptable and enjoy talking to people. So that made it much easier as well. But also, I think it helped me to learn how to read people and to know like who's safe and not, and, get a feel for the environment quite quickly. Whether you look at it as little traumas, having to like uproot all the time, or just things that really, it hurts. It's very hard for a kid to leave what they call home and then have to call a new place home. It's done every day. We see it still in military families now, but it is very hard. And over time, you do have to kind of say, like, who are the safe people to talk to and who's not? And this is a new environment, and you have to assess things differently and almost look at it from a different lens at a very young age. If you've been a military kid as well, you learn very early on how to shake hands properly at events, and like all of these things that other kids my age weren't learning, and they weren't having to go to these dinners and such. And so it was in some ways a wonderful, beautiful childhood of a lot of learning. In other ways, I grieve that I didn't get to have like those friends that knew you like your whole life. Now through social media, you can connect with those people and things, but in general, you didn't have that. So the negative sides that I found were just the constant need for adjustment. I mean, there's the positives and the negatives of it, and how exhausting that can be, and emotionally exhausting. And it wasn't until I had my mom die and the miscarriages that I started to reflect on my life and look at grief. And I realized, oh my gosh, all of that was grief. Like I was constantly having to grieve, but it's, suck it up, move on type mentality in that world. And like, this is what we do. We come together as a family, and this is what we do. We push through, and you're like, but I have feelings about this. I put this in my book as well. I talked about the stages of grief as a military kid and what we feel, and how that looks. And it is challenging. But it wasn't until 2018 that I realized I still have grief from all those moves. And I have a lot of, who am I? Because when you have to adjust that much, you kind of go like, well, do I really like what I like? And, I growing up with a Southern family, the term y'all, we say y'all, right? We moved from Mississippi to Washington, D.C., and I got made fun of for saying y'all. And for the longest time, I would never say that. And I had a very no Southern accent. And I went to college at Mississippi State University. And I remember one of the dads of a girl who lived in my dorm going, "You don't sound Southern." And I was like, why? He's like, "You don't say y'all." And I said, well, I used to get made fun of. And so I learned to cut that out. And then I realized like, hey, I'm in the perfect place to use this word again and to let that Southern twang happen. But I realized I had, I guess made a part of me much smaller than I needed to. And so a lot of my process and my grief work is, who am I in this, this stage of my life? Not having to move anymore. I can say y'all here, and they think it's cute, whatever. And it's okay. But it's grieving that I had to change in the past, that I couldn't be myself back then.
I think that's really interesting. A lot of it obviously is interesting. I am also from the South. I also do not say y'all. Just now saying it, that's probably the first time I've said it in gosh knows how long. But I quit doing it for different reasons. I just really equated, or I felt like other people equated Southerners with dumb people. And I didn't want to be a dumb person. So I did everything I could to reduce my accent. I can say one syllable words now, which I couldn't for a really long time. Don't say y'all, but it's interesting kind of the reasons that we do certain things like that. So did you ever have any resentment towards your parents as you were growing up for moving, or did you not even know to do that because that was just life for you? That was normal.
When I would say like 12, preteen, that's when I started to really resent it. Because as a kid, you're like, oh, this sucks. Okay, I'm moving on. But when you like into the teenage years and like boyfriends and dances were coming and all these, no, we're moving. Sorry, we got to go. And it's like, no. I have a summer planned. And then,
right.
no, our summer is moving. That was hard. And it was also hard not knowing until months before where we were moving. If we could find a house, would we live on base or off base? So I would say it was really the preteen years where I resented, you take it out on your parents because that's who you know. And then later on you get mad at the military, but then like, this is the lifestyle that your parent chose. And so there was a lot of resentment and frustration over it. And then my parents divorced when I was 13, 14. So it was like 12, I know what we're moving. I don't like that we're moving. Oh, and now you guys are going through divorce. So it all compounded at that time. And there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of like, just why are you doing this to me?
Right.
Because at that age, you're the victim of everything, right?
Everything.
Why do you do this every time to me? And it's very interesting because my brother is 4.5 years younger than me, and hearing him talk about that time, what that was like for him and what it was like for me, I was just so in my own world that I was like, oh, wow. As a kid, this is what you're going through. As a teenager, this is what I was experiencing. And we had different views on all of it. And his moving, obviously, he didn't have to move as much as I did.
Right.
But it was still, for him, it was like normal. And then starting early middle school, he stayed in one place the rest of the time and didn't have that adjustment. And so our childhoods are very different in that way. Yeah.
Did you have any jealousy over that?
I don't think I ever felt jealousy, but there was like frustration. If he ever complained about something, I would be like, dude, really?
You have no idea.
Like that's the hardship you're going through. But in general, I was very protective of him and like a second mom. My mom, when my parents divorced, my mom went on to law school. That's why we picked where we lived. So she could go to law school. And so I was taking care of him while she was in class and all those kinds of things. So yeah, there wasn't that, because of the age difference, there wasn't so much the like resentment and like but as much as like, let me tell you, back in my day,
right,
this is how things were. Like I had that more mentality with him. Yeah.
So fast forward to a couple years ago when you really went through some difficult times, and that's what really taught you about grief and allowed you to examine grief from your past. So what was it like for you to go through those traumas, really just one after the other, with your mom and the miscarriages? Yeah,
it felt very much like waves crashing over you, and you can't stand up, and you're like, no, come on, just let me just stand up and breathe for a second. Every time I feel like then there was another crash. It was such a shock to the system that, like, even talking about it now, I feel my body kind of like, woo, like, you feel the residual energy from it. The call, my brother had to call me about my mom. They found her in bed, and it was surreal. I still replay that. And when I was writing my book, I needed to go there. I needed to go back and talk about what it feels like, that shock experience. Because it's not just with death that we experience that shock experience. There are many other things that cause grief that we can feel that, like, wait, no, what? No, this can't happen. But I think the biggest thing that whole experience, like how it hit me, was because I was a mom to 2 little girls at the time, 2 and 4, and seeing their grief process. Now they didn't know about the miscarriages, but they knew about my mom. And so seeing them grieve and like ask questions while I was having to do my work, because had I not, like, I would just be an angry mom all the time.
Right.
That was like a really beautiful and difficult process. Because 2, not so much. They're just talking about Grandma Helen all the time. But 4.5, it's like, wait, where is she? Why can't I, Skype with her? Like, we usually color together. Why? And she's coming at Christmas. Why isn't she coming at Christmas? So there was this constant need to talk about it because children need to process it multiple times. And it was like, there was just days where I was like, honey, can you take this question? Because I've cried enough in front of her. I'm going to go over here and just like, be in my own space. With the miscarriages, that very first one happened when I went back to the States. We had seen the heartbeat, and I was flying over to be with my sister-in-law for her baby shower, and I was super excited. So only my aunt knew that we were pregnant, because I was like, somebody needs to know. And we were driving to my grandmother. So it was like a 6-hour drive from my sister-in-law and my brothers to my grandmother's. And we stopped at a gas station. And I was like, well, something's happening. And thankfully, we were 45 minutes from Mobile, Alabama, where they have a great women's clinic. And went there, and they took great care of me. But I was every 2-3 days back, and because we weren't sure. So I was back and forth. My family lives in Biloxi. So it was it was a different vacation than I thought. I was going there to grieve my mom, to have a little, to be there for the baby shower, but also to just be with my family and grieve that she was no longer here. And it was at about the 8-month mark, I guess, after she had passed. And so it was really divine timing that I was there in a space where I felt very warm and comfortable and safe. That I could go walk on my grandparents' land barefoot and sit by the magnolia tree and know my mom was right there as I go like, what the hell just happened? Why is this occurring? And yeah, you look back at those experiences and you can see pieces of why things needed to happen. Some of it created some closure that I really needed to have. Some of it was I was really at the right place for it to happen if it was going to. I love my husband and I love my girls, but it would have been really difficult to go through that process and then be mom all day long. And I got to just lay on the couch and mope and just be like, what is this? And my aunt and my grandmother just took care of me. And so it really was the way it was supposed to be. And then the second one happened. So Christmas Day for you guys and Christmas Eve is Christmas Day here. Second one happened on Christmas Day here or Christmas Eve. And I knew a day or two before I started having the cramping really bad and all the other problems that come with it. And I was washing the dishes and I just felt like something has happened. And so my doctor already knew, but it's Christmas Day. And this is the second one. The first one I had to have a procedure to help everything happen before I got on the airplane. But this one naturally could occur. And I know this can be a trigger for others to hear these stories, but it is healing for me to tell the story. It is healing to just say, like, these things happen. And a lot of the other healing work I had to do was, like planting things and saying, this is a seed for this baby and this is a seed for this baby, and allowing them to, grow and just know that in their own way, they're growing in a different way. And I did a lot of time out in nature, a lot of walks. We live in Bavaria, so go to the mountains and just walk and walk and walk. A lot of writing, talking to friends. Thankfully, I knew a lot of people who came out of the woodwork after the first miscarriage, because it was like, oh, and I'm like, what? You never told me. Like, well, people don't talk about these things. People don't just say like, oh, by the way, here, let's sip our wine together. And it's like, right. But we should, because, it's 1 in 4 pregnancies, not women, pregnancies. So, it's almost at 1 in 3. The doctor had told me that time, because we're able to check so much faster now when we're pregnant. That, it was helpful to have other women come beside me and not fix it or try to, and not tell me, oh, you'll get over it, or, oh, there'll be more babies, because they knew all the things people said, to say, like, you lost your mom and now you had these 2 things happen this year. I'm just going to come sit by you. And that was really powerful, Because that, even as a therapist, like, I sit with people all the time, but it's a totally different thing when you as a therapist get to be human fully and have someone else come and sit by you and just be like, I'm here. I've been there. You got to go through the fire, but I'm here. And there's a sort of an anonymous quote that I love, that is, we have to go through our fire so that we can walk out with cool buckets of water for the next person. And it's allowing them, like, they're going to have to go through their fire, but we have some tools, we have some things that will help cool them off in the process. And so that's been my goal ever since. And all of my grief work was, okay, I have these buckets of water, and I know I'll have other grief processes in the future, but right now, here's what I can give to others who are going to go through whatever grief they're going to go through. And as we saw last year, that was, and this year is quite prevalent, that needed.
You mentioned, having a lot of friends or people come out of the woodwork who had been through a similar experience. And I agree with you. It's a lot like mental health issues or domestic violence. It's one of those things that, it's uncomfortable to talk about. And so we just keep it inside. So how different was it for you to not have to do that and to be able to share and then learn that you had that similarity, with so many people that were there for you?
Right. I realized pretty early on how much society puts us in a shame cycle about it and makes it this thing that we should be embarrassed, we should feel ashamed, there's something wrong with us. And I just thought, like, well, that's bullshit. Like, how is there something wrong with me? I didn't choose this. I didn't ask for this. With my mom or, with the babies. And so very quickly I was like, no, I'm going to talk about this. And so, online I talked about it. I just shared because it's like, no, this is so normal. And really having the doctor look at me and be like, Katie, literally 1 in 4 pregnancies. So, like, the chances are so high. You just don't hear about them because people don't talk about it. I was like, that has to change, because this is, you can't not have somebody normalize and validate what you're experiencing when you go through things like mental health or domestic violence or trauma, miscarriage, all of these things. You need to hear other people have gone through it. I don't want to say survive sounds like, again, that victim kind of thing, but like experienced it.
Right.
And how they're living life in a certain way now because of that catalytic event kind of thing. So it was quite freeing for me. It was quite uncomfortable for many people around me. There were people who said, like, wow, you really put it out there online. And I'm like, why not? This is the only platform I have right now. If I just talk in my little neighborhood, they don't understand English very well. So what am I supposed to do? This is the way I can share. And there's a lot of people responding. I needed to hear this. I needed to know this. That kind of thing. So I spoke very early on about my mom, because so many people already had looked at me as a counselor and like, oh, she lost her mom. How is she going to deal with it? It's like, okay, I'll let you know. It's hard. And this is what I'm experiencing. And I'm angry these days. And I'm, horrible mom these days. And oh, well, like, this is grief. And then with the miscarriages, I was like, well, I'm already here. Let me start sharing these things. And then the pandemic, like, well, let me share about this. It just hasn't stopped. I feel like it's like, well, how about you talk about this now? And how about you talk about this now? But literally March of last year, after like just hearing everybody's stories, because when you start to open up, other people start to share.
Right.
And when you start to hear their stories and you start to hear more and more stories, you're like, first, I started collecting people's stories of grief. I was like, I want to know, what meaning did you find in it? Like, where are you going with it in your life that this event happened and it caused you grief? And so I started collecting those stories online. And then I was like, I'm going to write a book. And at first I thought it was going to be a book with these stories like Chicken Soup for the Soul kind of thing. Let's do this. And I was like, no, because those of us who are telling our stories have already understood that grief is different than what society wants us to think. There's something wrong, stop talking about it, it's private, keep that to yourself. I need to write a book about how this needs to change. And so it's called the new face of grief, because I was like, it's time to have a new face to grief. And so I have these women's stories in it from all around the world. And I'm like, here, see, that's grief. And it's okay. And here's grief. And this is okay. And my hope is that it breaks that stigma and the shame around whatever caused you grief, whether your pet died, you didn't get the job you wanted, or you had a childhood that really damaged you because of adults who are really broken. Whatever it might be, we can go to the spectrum, or a death. Mm-hmm. All of it is grief, and all of it is true and real, and your experience is yours and should not be shamed or boxed in by anyone. So it's having those people share their stories kind of was like no, this needs to get out. More and more people need to see that, hey, this is normal. And I would honestly say if we boxed in all of us together, we've experienced some pretty traumatic and lower traumatic issues, all of them trauma, we're the majority. And yet we're being shamed to not talk, and felt guilty for, oh, I made you uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Like, no, right. That's your issue, not mine. So, yeah.
How difficult was it for you to kind of shed that therapist skin? Because we look at our therapist as these rocks, like obviously your life is perfect. You can handle everything. Right. You got this. So how hard was it to say, no, I'm a person just like you. Right. I'm going to grieve as well.
Right. I think I'm still working on that. That is something I realized the military kid in me who was always adapting and really good listener and really able to say, like, listen to what people said and reflect it back to them really well. It's always been a part of me. I mean, my brother would even be like, turn off Counselor Katie. I'm like, I don't know how to. I don't mean to do this. It just happens. But what I've just realized is I can only be myself. And some of my qualities are very counselor-like. They've always been. Mm-hmm. And as much as I can pull back the layers for myself of like, oh, I don't know if I want to share that because they'll really see me. Well, then I need to share that, so pull that back. But I have found not everybody wants to hear it. And like I said, that's okay. That's their stuff. Mm-hmm. But the ones who have valued hearing it, it's empowered them. And that's what drives me. So it's difficult pulling back those layers fully. And some of it I realize is kind of projected on me. I don't think I always intend to create this persona, but as you said, like you see a therapist and this is who they are. This is how they must live. Mm-hmm. They must have it all figured out and organized. And that I have a lot of courses that I created online for like relationships and moms. They were all created out of necessity for myself. So like I have a course called Healthy Arguing because my husband and I are great arguers. So I was like, okay, I need to work on this, so I'm going to create a course, which is going to challenge me then to have to work on it, or like, really getting organized in your home, not necessarily like everything perfectly in its place, but like thinking of your home differently than you normally do, more like a business. How do I organize these things? That was because I needed that. So everything I have created, courses, ebooks, all of it is out of necessity for me going like, I need this right now. I need to work on these. Like how to kid-proof your marriage. You got two young kids. How are we doing this, babe? I'm going to write about it. Like the new face of grief is the first piece where it's not me because I needed it, but it was me going like, nobody else thinks this way. Like, but I need to bring everybody back in and go like, hey, no, this is normal.
Right.
Everything else was because I needed it. And the more that I shared that with people, they're like, no, I'm sure it's not that bad. I'm like, you write a blog post about, we fought about ketchup once, we're great arguers. Like, it's wonderful. And I always say arguing's not the bad thing. It's the fighting. It's the one that gets really bad.
Right.
So the argument is normal and healthy. We're very passionate, stubborn firstborns. That's not going away. And I'm very American in that, like, well, I think what I say is right. And he's very German and like, show me all the scientific evidence. So we clash a lot on those things. But I think that's the important thing is whatever you've gone through, you don't have to go and change the world. Even if it's just how you change how you interact with others, that is going to create the ripple effect. But if we keep playing that victim role of this happened to me and life keeps hitting me this way and hitting me this way and hitting me this way, then you don't feel like you have that control. But honestly, what has to happen is healing work. And the healing work comes when other people come beside you, and say, you're okay. I know it feels like you're alone, but you're not. Like, here's the tools that I use. Try it. See if it works for you, kind of thing. And I think that shift starts to help people feel more in control, especially over the grief process.
It sounds like what you're saying is that the healing process really can't be done all alone. You need that support system. So what do you say to those people who either say and maybe it's true, they don't have a support system. I just have no one I can rely on. I have no one I trust. Or the people who are just very walled off, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So they reject a support system. What do we say to those people?
Yeah. So the ones who say, like, around me, nobody's safe, this isn't, a good, that is some part of why the internet is beautiful, because we can search online, support group in whatever specific thing, and either find, right now, most things are online, but online or in person. And it's okay if you don't know anybody there, because you'll know them after the first meeting. Like, it's always that, and maybe that's me being like the new kid every year. It's like, you'll know everybody by the end of the hour or whatever. Like, it's okay. I know that there's a lot of situations in which family members are not safe and friends are very judgmental and things. So it is about you saying, okay, I'm really tired of these unhealthy, unsafe people around me. I want to find that safe person. And so if it's finding a therapist is the first step, or a coach, or somebody that you feel like, okay, this is the first step I want to take. Then you maybe go to them, and we're all trained with, to look for the resources. So it's like, oh, I know about this group. I know about this community of moms. I know about these couples who are struggling or divorce or whatever it might be. And then it's about the confidence to go and to show your face. And that's sometimes the problem. When it's I don't have anyone safe, I'm also afraid to really show what's going on. Now, those who box themselves in, I understand that personality type as well. I have many in my family like that. And so I get it, save face. I'll just keep it in. But what happens is we implode and we have health issues. We have the migraines, we struggle with sleep, we have the backaches, we have, our bodies and they're so connected. Everything's so connected. So when you're holding in that grief and that pain, you think you're holding it in really well, but it starts to seep through your pores almost. I remember telling my husband, like, I really feel like the phase of anger and grief, like, I skip over that. I just go straight to sadness because I know that's what it is. I'm just sad, and he's like, no, you come out, that comes out. We all see it. Maybe you don't, but it comes out. And I was like, oh, well, I just really forgot, and he's like, it's like, it just like, and I was like, okay, it does, it comes out. It comes out how we speak to people. We become passive aggressive or reactive, or we recluse from healthy connection. So I would say in those situations, if you need to be in an online group that's anonymous or something where you just feel like, hey, I can slowly open up and see people don't reject me or judge me, then I'm open to, starting to tell people in my community or whoever's safe, these things. Grief and the experiences that cause grief can be very private. And so it's not like we need to, my stuff has been like out there on my social media because I know part of why I'm here on earth is to share what I've learned. That's not everybody's, and I get that. So it is about who is that safe person, that first safe person that you can go, my friend Kelly, I'm just gonna say, Kelly, I have some things going on. Is there any chance we could talk? And then if she says yes, and it's like, I'm here for you. Okay, one step forward in the safe category. I need to be able to say these things to you and you not judge me. I can do that. Well, next step, say, because she's like, I don't know, what is it about? Then it's like, maybe not. But, it is about getting outside of our comfort zone. But if there's anything all of us have learned in the last year and a half is how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So this is, best time, or there's really no other time other than the best time when you are comfortable with the uncomfortable, mm-hmm. to just go for it and say, okay, I would like to find safe, healthy people to share what I'm going through and to share how I'm grieving. And maybe it's that you've gone into addiction. Maybe it's you going in the route of like avoidance and escaping and going down paths that hurt you, but you think like, no, everything's good. It feels good in the moment. Mm-hmm. Whatever it might be, recognize that only lasts so long. In the long term, you hurt yourself more. One of the biggest drivers for me is my kids, for needing to do healing work. Because, I want whatever is passed down the line from my great grandmother to my grandmother to my mom to me to not necessarily get passed to them. And that means I have to do the work. I have to do my own counseling. I have to do my own coaching. I have to do my own journaling. I have to feel it, as painful as it is. I have to feel it and sit with it, and then come out of it and figure out what's that next step. One of the best analogies I have for this is a lotus, because it grows in mud. And so you have to have darkness and yuck and gross for this beautiful blossom to come. And so you can't rush that. Like you can't rush that process. And so that, I think inevitably you can hide it, or you can say there's no safe people. But in today's world, there are plenty of safe people. It's about finding them and being determined enough to stick with it, to find that person. Yeah. I've even reached out to like a podcast host before and been like, this spoke to me. I don't have any, have on this particular topic, I don't have anybody to talk to right now. And like been able to just write them. And people are open, especially those of us who are online, like we want to hear your stories. And so that's been really helpful too. So if you hear somebody you really connect with, now if it's like Brene Brown, I'm sorry, she probably won't respond. She's very busy. But some of us in the smaller category where it's like, we have the time to write the email back and go, right, sister, I've been there. I know, I feel that too. Yeah, here's some ideas. And then you have somebody to talk to.
And for so many of us, that's why we do what we're doing, in the first place. So we want those people to reach out. We want those people to connect and know that they have somewhere to go. I think one of the biggest things you said that I really appreciate and want people to hear is that the support system may not be staring right back at you, but it's out there. It is out there. And sometimes we just have to make a little bit of extra effort to go look for it. But that's so much easier now, as you said, with the internet and with everything being online and Zoom and, all that. It's much easier to connect.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little bit about grief in general, because you said something earlier that I really want people to hear and to understand better. And that is that grief can be all different types of things. Yeah. I think sometimes people feel guilty because, oh, well, what I went through, it's not that bad. Your mom died, but I didn't get the job I wanted. Well, I have no right to feel bad about that. So can you talk a little bit about grief and what it really means? Because it's not just about a death or a loss of life. It can be so much more than that.
Yeah. I like to define grief that's not related to the death of a person, though this definition would apply as well. When life doesn't go the way we think it should, and we have to learn how to adjust and let go. So that would apply to a death, because it's like, no, you weren't supposed to die. It was too young, or it was not the right time, or, I expected life to be with you for this long. And even if they're older and they die, there's that like, no, I expected more days, more months, more years. Then if it's a job or a divorce or a hot topic right now, which I think is so great, is being spoken about more and more, is like sexual identity, that people are like, their children are coming out and going, hey, I don't think I'm this anymore. I think I'm this. And there's the grief of like, no, my little girl is supposed to be this. This is not it. So all of that comes up. But what happens is, because grief and death are like best buddies in the world, hidden grief or disenfranchised grief gets pushed under the rug, and we all suffer. And truly, what happens is we hear the phrases, well, nobody died.
Right.
Yeah. And then it shames and guilts you back into, put that back in the box, stuff it back in, good luck. The reality is, moving a rite of passage, like becoming a parent, has grief with it. I worked in residence halls for a few years. Going to college has grief with it. Like leaving your parents, no longer having that help, having to do it on your own, that has grief. Going to your first job, sometimes that transition. This sounds so first world, but there was this moment where I was like, I don't have summer vacation anymore. Like,
now what?
No longer a block of time. What is this? Adulthood? Like, no. That's not the type of grief I'm talking about, but there is that like, oh, I can't go back. That grief. I can't go back. Midlife crisis, quarter life crisis. That's grief. This is not the life I thought I was going to live. Wait, I thought this was supposed to be easier. Why aren't things happening this way? I thought this person would still be in my life at this time. Having to end, family relationships or friendships, or romantic relationships. That's also grief. So it shows up in so many different ways. So just think of it in times in your life where life didn't go the way you expected. And it was a shock to the system in a way. And I had a friend once say, it's like you didn't get your Cheerios and you kind of temper tantrum about it. And I was like, yeah, some grief is that. Yeah. Where it's like, well, this was supposed to be the way I'd said it should be. Instead of like, okay, well, life comes with positives and negatives and ups and downs, and that's normal. And there's no good things happen to only good people. That's not life. So once we remove those constructs, we start to see that grief is actually happening throughout our life. It's a normal process. This whole grief shaming that's happening. I just finished a blog post today on online grief shaming, because man, people can be harsh about, like, you're still complaining about this.
Right.
It was just an animal. Like, why is it, like, oh, whatever. And you're just like, okay, that's again, their issues, not yours. But the shaming that occurs around grief is very sad to me, because it continues to make people feel like there's something inherently wrong with them for feeling how they feel. And it's not true. We've given, as I said, we've given a lot of power to the minority of people who maybe experience it. Or what I find is some of us who've experienced trauma, we're not ready to share it or feel it. And so it's easier to, at other people. Because I don't want to feel mine, so stop talking about yours. And it gets, it keeps that cycle going.
How did you get to that place of understanding what grief is and formulating that definition? Because the things that made you really realize a larger piece of grief were losses of life. Right.
Well, like I shared, once I had those experiences, and then I started to like think about my whole, again, you feel the grief and you're like, oh my God, I felt this before. Okay, when my parents divorced, that was the first thought. I thought, man, yeah, no, life is supposed to be the four of us. And then it wasn't. So that. And then I thought, no, I felt this even the moves, like I felt this in different times and in different ways. And then it was like, then it was just connecting the dots. And I have a little bit of a scientist brain where it's always coming in, and then all of a sudden it formulates and you're like, there's the perfect formula. There it is. And I thought about what is the key thing in all of those, that life didn't happen as I thought it should, or I expected it to. And, as a kid, of course, you're told a family unit looks like this.
Right.
This is what family is. For the longest time, my mom couldn't call the three of us a family, because she's like, this isn't a family. We're not a family anymore. And it's like, yes, actually.
Still a family.
Right, still family. But her shoulds impacted her grief process too, and almost made it even worse because it's like I constantly look at what it shouldn't be versus this is how it was supposed to be and this is how it is. So it was just having those hits and then going like, I felt this before, here's where, and this is what I usually have clients do is create their grief timeline. Like where is this theme happened? So it helps again to normalize, oh wow, I've actually felt this and I got through it. And because of those things, I did these things. And I always say it's like watching a movie. We, as the watchers, get to see the actor's lifespan and go, oh, that happened because this was supposed to happen. And then they met her and then it worked out and he got married. But when we're in it, we don't get to see fast forward. And we assume it's all bad, it's going to stay bad, and not like, actually, this had to happen. So then the next step occurs, so that this is how movies are created from people's real lives. So I have them do that timeline as a movie kind of thing, where it's your movie. And then if it continued on, looking at this trend, what would you like to see change? Is it, well, I always feel like I'm a victim to it, or I always feel like I caused the thing to happen. I have control over the person dying, or I have control over losing the job or losing the house. And it's like, okay, so let's talk about what that looks like. And we sort of map out, what do you want the future to look like? But that piece normalizes the whole experience of grief. And that definition of our expectations is just purely what it truly is through each thing. That does not negate how bad it is, or what is done to us. But it just shows us, because society says this is what a healthy this looks like, this is what a healthy that looks like, this is what it's supposed to be. And then again, the majority of us don't experience that, and we think something's wrong with us. And then we don't know how to grieve it.
So tell me, when it comes to wellness, what do you do to take care of yourself, and what would you recommend as just kind of a baseline item or piece of advice for people to do to keep themselves well?
So some things that I really enjoy is being out in nature, whether it be going for walks by a river, or like I said, we're near the mountains, so getting to go for hikes. There's something about all the green and all the colors and hearing the animals that just takes you outside of the buzz of the internet and the busy world, and just reminds you that there's always an ebb and flow, that there's the winter and the spring and the summer and the fall, and all of that is natural and normal. I also love journaling. I will, a lot of the grief work I've done is allowing like the inner child of that age, wherever I was, to just speak her mind and let those words come out. I'm also really big into like the burning rituals of like, write the things you would never tell anybody that you need to get out, and burn it and release it. I think those can be really powerful. But on the day-to-day, I love having some essential oils depending on what I'm going through. I have different teas I use depending on the grief or experience I'm having. Just making sure I hydrate myself, making sure that I'm doing something with my children that makes me laugh, so that I don't go crazy all the time. And reminding myself that I'm just as important as the other figures in my home. Because by doing that, then I do make sure I take care of myself, and I do make sure that my wellness is important. And that the whole self-care is taking care of myself. And so that looks different every day. So I'm very much into like intuition, like today, what is it that would really fill my cup? What does that look like? Is it something I can do with the kids or not? And, how do I navigate those things? But it's largely what inspires me that day. It's like, I want to sit and read a chapter. Okay, kids, I'm going to read a chapter out loud because I want to read this chapter for myself. Of course they get bored and move on, but whatever that might look like. So I really encourage people, when it comes to wellness, you find what works for you. And even if it's something that someone else wants to make you feel guilty for, like, or how do you even have the time to do that? Or that costs so much or whatever. To remember, when other people attack what you're doing, that is true wellness, that's not about you again. That's their own issues. However they can, how they might see self-care, or are they actually even taking care of their own wellness? So.
What about relationship advice? So I know you have written courses and blog posts and everything else when you need it. So what would be your top piece of relationship advice?
I think the top piece, and I've learned this by being in a bicultural and bilingual in the sense of that English is not my husband's first language, but it's I call it the romantic language. It's how we met and how we speak to each other, is to really be yourself. To, you naturally will like stones shape each other, but remember what's true to you. What are the things you enjoy, and incorporate that into the relationship, and also incorporate times for you to do them on your own. Often we think we've got to do everything with our partner. They need to be everything for us. And that gets really unhealthy fast. So making sure that you are able to communicate, hey, tonight, I know we usually watch whatever show. I'm going to go take a bath and read a book or something. And, can you, if the kids cry, you got them, right? And sometimes there's well, tomorrow night's your night. You do whatever you want tomorrow night. But tonight is one night. So be able to communicate what you need by being yourself in that, and not have to feel like you have to fight to get what you want. And that takes time. It takes both partners being able to say, I respect who you are. I respect what you need. Those conversations are best to happen in calm moments, not in fights. Well, now's the time for us to talk about, no, wait till it's a calm moment, not when you're driving. People do these things on road trips, and I'm like, guys,
the worst.
You're stuck in the car if you have a problem, And if you argue, so we'll get a little into arguing. When we're arguing and our blood pressure and our heart rate goes up to over 100. We have tunnel vision. We don't hear very clearly. Our short-term memory is impacted. So that's not what you said 20 minutes ago. You said this. Sorry, you're both probably wrong. Then we have the whole fight or flight. So we're just adrenaline going. We're not going to have effective conversation. So why are you doing that in the car? The reality is, I'm guilty. It's so easy because we're here. We've got the next 2 hours. Let's talk about this.
Hash it all out.
Guys, listen to something that we're gonna. But that piece of it, know that you must be yourself, and you must speak your mind and share what you want to in love, not in I'm a reactive teenager. And have those conversations in calm moments. Hey, honey, I realize I'm not really feeling like myself in this relationship, and here's what I need. What about you? Don't always make it about yourself. What do you need? Oh, okay. You want to do this on the weekend, or you want to have the freedom to do this, or you want this much money to spend. Okay, maybe we need to negotiate some of that, but I respect that that's your wishes. I'm not going to blow up at you and attack you because I think it's unreasonable. We are very quick to be reactive with our partners when they don't fall in line right beside us. And actually, it's quite normal because we're two different people. So, yeah.
Love it. Well, we have talked about some heavy topics, so we're going to finish up with something a little more fun and a little lighter. As you know, I love tattoos. I have a bunch. I like to collect them. I'm planning my next ones already. Tell me about your favorite tattoo that you have.
Yeah, so I have two darkened stars on my feet. They're on the inside of my heel. I got them when I was 24. My dad had a major surgery and kind of went wrong, and we weren't quite sure if he was going to make it. And I had that happen right after breaking up with my college sweetheart. And just it was no. We were supposed to be together. This should happen this way. So I had that, and then my dad, and I just felt this, everything was, my compass was, I didn't feel like myself. And I was in the middle of my master's program as a counselor, and I'm life's not supposed to happen to us. This is back in that, no, I'm going to help people through their stuff, not
me.
this should not be happening. And so I got the stars on my feet so that I could look at the stars with my feet on the ground. So often we get into dreamer mode, like this will be how my life will look, and this everybody will be healthy and happy, and we're looking at the stars and you fall over kind of thing. Versus I can dream and I can also be realistic. I can, see that I want these things for my future, but I also see I have these problems right now in my life that I need to work on to get to that point. So those are my stars. I had them done twice to make them really nice and dark, because that area, like gets kind of grayish over time. It was a very painful experience, as you can imagine.
Yes.
But with nerves go and stuff. But I wouldn't change it. I love them. They're such a great reminder of that time and how far I've come.
That's so cool. I love that story, and I love the meaning that you have. Yeah. Any future tattoo plans?
I would love to. Probably not, though. It might be later on, but like after the kids, post-kid, because I feel like might go a little crazy. In a different life, I would have sleeves. Like I live that life in my mind. So It's happening somewhere, I'm sure. Yes. So, but yeah, I have ideas of things I would like in the future, but nothing is stuck long enough. And I always say it needs to stick around long enough for me to go like, okay.
Agree.
I always wanted the quote, "This too shall pass," but I thought, well, that's also kind of like, it's a great reminder, but it's also a little like, oh, that's on your body the rest of your life. This too shall pass.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Your body will too. So
this
there are
shall
some things where in the moment you're like, yeah, and then you're like, when I'm a grandmother, well, I want to explain that story to. So I think about those things. So yeah.
Very smart of you.
Yeah.
So tell everyone where they can find your book if they want to check that out, and where they can find you in all of your amazingness.
Thank you. Well, so the book will be available on pre-order by the time this comes out, and you can get it. The website is thenewfaceofgrief.com. And it's pre-order on Amazon if you want to find it there. And my hope is it will definitely be ebook form and then also paperback. And my goal the next couple months is to get an audio form, because it'll be released October 5th. And so that is the 3rd anniversary of my mom's death. And it felt like a good legacy piece of her life and how she's impacted me. You can find me on Instagram at katie.wrestler, and that's R-O without the 2 dots on the top. Don't worry. SSLER. I'm on Facebook as well, Growing Through Hidden Grief. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Katie Wrestler as well. There's not too many of us.
Katie, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing your story and really giving more information to everyone about grief and what grief really is, and how that we truly need to normalize these conversations and not feel that shame. I think it is such an important message, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing it today.
Thank you. And thanks, Claudia, for what you're doing, because you are creating a voice out of the things you've experienced in life and saying that this is what empowerment looks like. And it's really powerful to watch.
Thank you. I so appreciate you, Katie.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I really hope you guys enjoyed my chat with Katie as much as I did. I really appreciate her outlook on normalizing grief and the healing process, and not being ashamed to talk about what we're going through. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it.